Legendary Fjorm got kicked out of the holoforms right at the last moment, but in a strange turn of events, we have got Summer Fjorm joining her Nifled siblings, and this is going to be my guide on getting the best skills on them. And of course, we're going to be having skills up to the Emblem Ylgr banner, which is going to be having that juicy Lagu's Friend 4 up for the grabs. And Summer Fjorm is probably going to be breaking her back by carrying this entire holoforms because she is almost a year-old unit and she's still pretty decent. So she's in a very competitive class type of sword infantry units, and she's got Icebound Brand as her preferred weapon. This gives her minus in special cooldown, making Frostbite Mirror into a 1 cooldown special, which then she can pre-charge with Time Pulse 4 and then loop it. And she also has Null Counter Disrupt against the ranged foes, not against the melee foes, keep in mind. And then she's able to get +5 to all of her stats in the combat, and also inflicts penalty on foes' attack and speed depending on 20% of her visible speed. So this allows her to be a lot more speedy, which is needed as a sword infantry unit. She also inflicts the guard effect on the foe, which is not that insane anymore because we have got so many null guard effects right now, but still it's a good defensive effect to have, I suppose. And finally, she gets 5 flat damage reduction whenever her defensive special triggers. So Frostbite Mirror is a defensive special, which means that she's able to get this unpierceable damage reduction. It's not a whole lot of flat damage reduction compared to units like Emblem Ylgr or even Attuned Sita, but still it's good to have. And taking a look at her special, it is basically an improved version of Ice Mirror, which does work against the melee foes and gives you 10 damage reduction against them, and gives you 30% damage reduction against the ranged foes. This damage reduction is not pierceable. If it was pierceable, they would have explicitly stated that. And after the special triggers, she's able to have that damage reflection like Ice Mirror and does the true damage based on the total damage reduced. And then she gets distant counter effect out of the special if her special is ready at start of the combat. The important thing is that her special should be pre-charged at start of combat, and that's why Time Pulse 4 is her best Lotsy skill. She does come with a pretty good build for a speedy unit, but this can of course be improved upon. And back when she came out, she used to be a top tier sword infantry unit, but of course the life of a sword infantry unit is short-lived. So she faced a lot of competition, but even back then she had a higher ceiling compared to god swords at that time like Fallen Female Byleth and Lucia, who only got +5 to their stats, whereas Summer Fjorm was able to inflict that penalty on foes' attack and speed. So this way she could be a lot faster, and even now she is a decent unit. Of course we have insane Omni tanks, but still, if you're going to be spending a Forma Soul on her, she can function fine even at unmerged. She's not too insane, but with the build that you can get in the holoform, she can stack up that flat damage reduction. Before we nab Nifled Formas, what if the world was as dystopian as Surtur wanted? Enter Food Devils, an ambitious indie SRPG game that mixes the tactical grid-based combat system of Fire Emblem with the thrilling unpredictability of roguelike games. In this ravaged world, you stand as the last remaining chef, wielding your culinary skills as weapons, and with no other choice of survival, you will have to forge contracts with Food Devils, which each have their own whims and fancies, but they're going to be aiding your adventures and your restaurant. With a diverse array of Food Devils at your disposal, there's probably going to be one that fits your tastes. The game features a story with branch paths and a whole lot of top tier voice acting. We are really grateful that the Kickstarter campaign is going so well, and now Food Devils is about to get released on consoles including Nintendo Switch. So please check out the links in the description, and thank you to my friend Alfred Camon and Studio Diamond for sponsoring this video.
Towards this noble end, I shall be your peerless warrior! Itadakimasu!
Wait, little chef. Don't forget to back my cause. Or I'll need to persuade you the hard way.
And if you're going to be grabbing a premium special, then you can get Godlike Reflexes if you want to have better damage reduction against the melee tanking, but you're just going to be using her preferred special anyways. But this could be an option to increase the value of your Forma. And for Slot A, bonus doubler 4 is by far the best Slot A skill you can pick up, because this can give you Spectrum +10, and she's got distant counter built in her special. So this way she's able to stack up a lot of stats, which is needed for Lagu's Friend. And whenever you want any kind of healing, you can just switch back to her default attack speed finish, but bonus doubler 4 is pretty much the main option. And for slot B, you might think that Lagu's friend is a bit of a weird option because she doesn't really have the highest draw bulk, but keep in mind that Lagu's friend works with any kind of defensive special. It doesn't really have a cooldown requirement for it, and you're gonna be able to get that flat damage reduction based on 20% of her defense or resistance, which is again not that high, but it does add up with her weapon and makes her a bit more tanky. And she also gets that true damage on her special triggers, and she already gets that damage reflection from her special and the true damage, so she's gonna be hitting really hard. And hitting hard is not enough nowadays, you also need to pierce through the damage reduction, and Lagu's friend gives you the 100% damage reduction piercing, which is quite a lot. The special jumping doesn't really matter too much for her, but the other effects definitely do, and that's why Lagu's friend 4 is gonna be the main skill and the main reason why you would spend a Forma Soul on her. If you don't get the skill, then there's really no point of spending a Forma Soul on her, and she is going to be able to get 11 flat damage reduction out of this build at this kind of investment with all of these buffs with bonus doubler 4, and then with her weapon she gets 5 flat damage reduction, so she pretty much ends up getting around like 14 to 16 flat damage reduction, which is useful for tanking. And then with Frostbite Mirror, you have got more unpierceable damage reduction. And now we've got Emblem Ylgr. So if you have him, and he's going to be appearing in the Legendary banner at the end of this month, you can run him and get even more unpierceable damage reduction against the ranged foes. And all of this makes her a pretty good Omni tank with this kind of unpierceable damage reduction and the flat damage reduction. And also the damage reduction piercing, which she would have to run something like physical null follow-up to get it otherwise. And even at that point, you only get 50% of it, while Lagu's friend gives you the full damage reduction piercing, which is really good when you're going to be hitting that hard with the true damage stacking. For slot C, Panic Smoke is going to be a pretty nice alternative skill for tanking, as it does give you the foe penalty doubler status, and it can actually work out if you pre-charge her special with something like Asker or Infantry Pulse, and then she can loop her Frostbite Mirror by just attacking the enemies. And if you face some kind of guard enemy, then you can also provide her with the Null Guard support from Mythic Lumera or Fallen Lumera, so it could work out. But at the end of the day, Time Pulse 4 is simply the best slot C skill for her, no matter what, because she needs her special to be pre-charged at start of combat to get that distant counter effect. Sure, you can get the special jumping from Lagu's friend, but it needs to be pre-charged, and that's why Time Pulse 4 is really invaluable. But you can still try and pick up some premium options, and Pulse of Blades is also something you can pick up because then you're able to pre-charge her Frostbite Mirror. You're not able to get that looping like Time Pulse 4, but you get the visible buffs instead, which does work out with bonus doubler. And Infantry Null Follow 4 could also be an option because she does lack Null Follow Up in her kit, so that is important. Attack Speed Pledge is also a skill you can get for the visible buffs, and it plays well with the bonus doubler stacking. And it also gives you the special charges status, which can help you loop her special against the guard foes. But Time Pulse 4 again is pretty much the best option that you should be running, even if you get these premium options. Gunnthra was the second legendary unit that we had got, and she does have a weapon refined in her Blizzard Tome, so it does give her +3 resistance, even though it's not the highest, and she's able to get extra attack in the combat depending on total penalties on the foe. And you want to be stacking up a lot of debuffs on the enemies so that you can get better damage output. She also debuffs the foe's speed and resistance by -4 in the combat, and then with the Refined Ray, she's able to debuff all stats of the foe by -4, and she also gets the foe penalty doubler effect in the combat, or the Pelagian effect, or the Vulture effect. It has many names. But yeah, basically this is going to be able to capitalize on the debuffs on the enemies. But nowadays we have a lot of debuff neutralization, both as a status and also as an effect built into the weapon of many units. So you're really not able to get that high damage output or get a lot of debuffs with foe penalty doubler effect. And she does have her exclusive slot B skill in Chilling Seal 2. And at start of turn, it is going to be inflicting -7 debuff to all stats of the foe that has got the lowest defense on the team. And then it inflicts -7 attack and resistance debuff on the foes that are in 2 spaces of that foe. So this is going to be helping her with the playstyle of her weapon, just getting those debuffs. But nowadays we just have much better debuffing skills that are a lot more consistent and give you even the negative status effects on the enemies. So this has not aged the best, but still it can get the job done. Gunnthra actually used to be a pretty nice unit with her high damage output, but then we got a lot of damage reduction and hardy fighter ages where she's just not going to be getting past that. And she also does not score well in arena. She needs G-Dual Cavalry 4, and that is really not going to be helping you much if you're trying to stay in tier 21. So being a low scoring legendary unit is just not it. And there's also the debuff neutralization being present, which is also going to be a big problem for her. And her stat spread is really weird where she doesn't really have a lot of bulk, so she's not really going to be surviving a lot of hits back, even with the foe penalty doubler effect that she's got in her weapon. But if you want to upgrade her, then this is the best chance. And for her weapon, you can try and get T-Time Set Plus just as a fun option, but Blizzard Tome is going to be the ultimate weapon that she's going to be running. For slot A, Flared Sparrow is going to be the best slot A you can pick up because she needs to function in the player phase and the pre-combat damage helps her. And then you pair that up with Occultist Strike so that you can get even more pre-combat damage, so that at least you can improve her damage output against the foes that have a lot of damage reduction or debuff neutralization, because against them, Gunnthra is really not going to be doing much with her weapon. And just as a tip, the appearance rate of the preferred skills and preferred weapons is higher, so you can get that first so that it doesn't keep on appearing, and then you can try and get the other skills like Occultist Strike. And then Speed Resistance Fortress 4 is also an option that you can run if you really want to get that Canto 1 for something like arena usage, and if you value that a lot more, because there's no alarm skill to be run on Gunnthra, and she's going to be missing out on that Canto option, which is going to be sucking a bit when you need to retreat and you can only be in the range of the enemies. And for slot C, Panic Smoke is going to be an amazing option with her weapon because it stacks up with the foe penalty doubler effect in her weapon, and this way you can also inflict that status on the enemy. So it is really good for that. It's just that she will have to enter the combat, which kind of sucks a bit if you're not able to secure a kill. So you can try and get inside attack speed instead if you just want to get the extra offenses, and if you don't want to enter the combat to inflict the foe penalty doubler status. Attack Resistance Ploy 3 is also an option if you're resistance stacking on her or if you have her at max investment. You can pretty much run something like this, I suppose, in arena, where you can get the Ploy debuff on the enemy and run other slot B skills like Occultist Strike or the Fortress skill. So it could be an option, but her resistance is not the highest. She's mainly going to be ploying the nukes, which don't have high resistance to begin with. I kind of like Panic Smoke a bit more, even though you have to enter into the combat compared to these skills. Hrid is a Sword Cavalier, and unfortunately he is pretty much one of the worst legendary units that we have got in the game, because trying to function as a bulky Cavalier is already a failed endeavor 99% of the time, and the 1% of the time you have to be something like Legendary Seliph and literally get a god tier weapon refine. And another problem is that Hrid is not a high scoring unit in arena, just like Gunnthra, so you'll have to run R-Dual Cavalry 4 on him, which kind of sucks. And there's always an argument between who is worse, Gunnthra or Hrid. But in my opinion, I think Hrid is a bit worse because at least Gunnthra is a ranged cavalry unit. She can have access to the pre-combat damage skills, and she can also just take advantage of those debuffs on the enemies. And her threat range is a lot bigger, so that way you can force the enemies to rally in something like arena. And Hrid also doesn't really have a lot of options with his weapon, so this does give him +3 attack, and if any kind of penalty is active on the foe, then he gets the guaranteed follow-up attack and gets the follow-up denial on the foe. And nowadays follow-up denial really doesn't mean much when, everything is going to be having null follow-up, but at least guaranteed follow-up attack is nice as a slow unit. And then at start of combat, if his HP is at or above 25%, or if a penalty is active on foe, he inflicts -5 attack and defense debuff on the foe in the combat, and then he can also inflict another round of -5 attack and defense debuff on the foe, and then he has got the in-combat panic on foe's attack and defense. So this is not the worst thing because in arena, units are going to be having the visible buffs, but still this is not the greatest effect to be having on a weapon refine, and if this was something else, it would have made him a bit better. So because he has got the in-combat panic, that just locks him out of a lot of the other options for the skills that he can get, and he does come with Freezing Seal too, which helps him with his preferred weapon. So at start of turn, it is going to be inflicting the foes with the lowest resistance and the foes in 2 spaces of them with -7 attack and defense debuff and also the guard status. So the guard status does help him as a tank and can also help your other units, but again, guard has kind of been lower in the value because of all of the null guard and the tempo effect that we've got, so not the best lobby skill, and there are just not a lot of options you can get instead. So Hrid is going to be struggling a bit, and only the biggest fans of him are going to be trying to get him. And if you're going to be getting him, then No Quarter is easily the best special you should be getting for that damage reduction piercing. And with Emblem Marth, this is going to be a 2 cooldown special that you can trigger on your double. And for slotted, there are not a lot of options. I mean, you're not going to be running attack defense clash on a Forma unit, so Earthfire boost becomes one of the options for stacking up attack and defense. It also gives you extra HP, so he can actually have pretty good amount of HP for a +1 merge unit, as you can see. It can also give him the guard effect, which is going to be helping you if you're not running his preferred sloppy skill. And if in the future we get better sloppy options, then getting this would be really good. Even though you do need to stay near your allies, distant defense res solo is going to be his other option, but tanking the range threats is going to be a bit hard, especially at +1 merge with no damage reduction out of the weapon. You're going to be relying all on the attack debuffs on the enemy, and unfortunately there are not too many slot B options you can run on him, so attack defense Knack 4 is actually one of the options you can get, and this way you will have to use some kind of positional skill. You can debuff the enemy's attack and defense and get that splash debuff, and also inflict them with the sabotage status, which does help with his playstyle. So this is one of the better options that he can get, because he cannot run Gambit because No Quarter is a low cooldown special. Cannot run lull attack defense because he has got in combat panic in his weapon, so that just does not work out. There's no tier 4 version of attack defense near trace, so it's not really too hot for him. And for slot C, Elias has got the option of getting alarm attack defense, which is going to be giving him more attack and defense, and also the Canto 1 status, so that does help you with the retreating and also just positioning him better as a cavalier. Unfortunately, the snack skill is not going to be working in Arena because you'll need to run some kind of high scoring assist, unless we get reposition plus or something like that this year in Arena. So it's going to be a bit hard for him there, and you just need to run him with his preferred slot B skill instead. A lot of people really like Gambit on many of the slow cavaliers, and I guess if you really want to run it, then this is a build that you can run. So you're going to be missing out on the damage reduction piercing because you have no quarter, and you can try and passively give him the damage reduction piercing with Yukimura or Ledger and Camilla, I suppose, but I still recommend the first build more. And for his weapon, you can try and get Wyvern Katana Plus, which is a dual phase Brave Sword, which does work really well with Gambit because it is going to be giving you that 15 true damage. So the Brave hits is really good, and you don't really have to depend on the guaranteed follow-up attack, which again is not going to be working many times against the null follow-up enemies. So the Brave effect is a lot better, and you can run this with a 5 cooldown special like Ether or Miracle. You can of course try and get No Quarter just as an expensive special to get more value, but with Gambit, you should be running this. And Gambit, unfortunately, is not really as good anymore because you want to run low cooldown specials so that you can trigger them and just pierce the damage reduction with something like No Quarter. And there's just so much damage reduction piercing nowadays that a lot of the nukes are just going to be making short work of the 50% damage reduction that you already get out of it. So unfortunately, the return on Gambit is not really all that amazing. And same goes for the Prime skill because we've got Nurgle, Mythic Loki, and Tina who can just snatch away your visible status effects. But if you want to get high amounts of attack and defense, then this is going to be an option with a lot of support. Summer Ylgr is a Book 3 Axe Infantry unit, and back then she was a pretty popular merge project option, but right now she faces an insane competition from just the free-to-play Axe Infantry units, which as you can see, they're just going to be having much better speed, and they're able to run the build that she can run a lot better. So only spend your Forma Soul if you're going to be plus and merging her, or if you have already plus and merged her, and if you're on your way of building her up, then this could also save you some heroic grails. So for her weapon, Arcane Thrima is going to be the best weapon for her, and it's not going to be available in the holo forms, and I'm just showing this so that you can get an idea for her best build and the ultimate build, so only there for the illustration. So after you get her from the holo forms, you can try and give her this weapon, but from the holo forms you can try and get Acts of Devotion, as it is going to be giving you that pre-combat damage. It unfortunately doesn't really give you any kind of extra speed, but that is pretty much the best inheritable axe you can try and get. And then for her special godlike reflexes is going to be the best option so that you can get that unpierceable damage reduction and the true damage. And Vital Astra has really fallen off very hard because all of its damage reduction is completely pierceable, and that's why you want to run this special instead. For Slot A, Attack Speed Finish 4 is going to be an amazing option because you're always going to be triggering your godlike reflexes with Lagu's Friend, so you're going to be getting that constant healing for the self-sustain and that true damage. And in this Hall of Forms, we have got Distant Bonus Doubler, so you can also try and get that if you want to stack up more stats. And Firestorm Boost is also an option which you can try and get, and it actually has good synergy with the full tempo effect of Arcane Forma because you're going to be stopping the enemy specials, and unless they have Null Guard, they're not triggering their specials. And then just like Fjorm, her elder sister, she's going to be wanting Lagu's Friend because this is her best option for tanking. And it does work with godlike reflexes. Again, the cooldown does not matter for the defensive specials, and it gives you that flat damage reduction and also the 100% damage reduction piercing. And then finally for her Slot C Panic Smoke 4 is not only going to be good for the Omni tanking, but it also has good synergy with the debuffs of Arcane Forma and also the sabotage effect that you can get out of it in the combat. So this is going to be making it so that you can have even more debuffs on the enemies, and you don't really need Time Pulse 4 or Pledge or anything like that when you're going to be running her with Lagu's Friend because it is going to be giving you that special jump and you're going to be triggering godlike reflexes. And again, Emblem Ike is something you can run to get even more unpierceable damage reduction. And at this kind of max investment, you can easily tank a lot of ranged threats. So Distant Counter Melee Sacred Seal is an option, but if you're going to be running her with Distant Bonus Doubler, then you can stack up even more stats. The next month, we're going to be getting Arcania Hall of Forms, and Legendary Marth is scheduled to be rerun in June. And there's no remix banners, so he's pretty much going to be on the Hall of Forms banner unless they change it last minute just like Legendary Fjorm, but I hope they don't do that. And these are going to be all of the potential candidates. There's also going to be the rerun of Legendary Sida, Goto, and Medius in the month of June. I'm not really too sure about the chances of them happening in Hall of Forms, but technically they are still an option because of their rerun. And if I had to narrow down all of these options into two pools, then I would have this. So Legendary Marth is pretty much happening. And then in the blue pool, I'm going to be having Summer Norn because she is a pretty popular Grail project option. And green could have Spring Maria. You could get Wyvern Drift on her and be cute. And she is also in the Divine Codes, and they like to put the Divine Codes units in these Hall of Forms, so that could work out. And Halloween Zane could happen because there is this rule in Hall of Forms that there's always going to be one magical unit on the Hall of Forms patch, be it a mage or a dragon, and his Weapon Refine is in early 2025, so they could try and bait out the Weapon Refine gamble, I feel like, if they really want to do that. So he could be an option. And then Windtrap Katria, I think that is also a potential option, even though she's kind of a bit off from the cutoff. So the fastest unit to appear in the Hall of Forms from their time of release is Young Minerva, and she took 298 days, whereas Windtrap Katria is going to be around like 291 days. So the margin isn't really all that big compared to the precedents that we have got, and they love their 4-star focus units, and she's also in the Divine Codes, so it makes their chances better to appear in Hall of Forms. And then Nagi is pretty much the second good green option after Spring Maria, so she could also happen. And then Fallen Maria is also there, and not the most insane unit, but still pretty strong with her effect. And keep in mind that healers don't really count towards one magical ally per Hall of Forms patch. So even if Fallen Maria is there, there has to be some kind of mage or dragon that could show up. Halloween Naga is also an option, but I feel like Halloween Zane has more chances because of the Refined Gamble. So we'll find it out next month, and you can come back to see if I was right or wrong. You can click the link on your stream right now to check out my breakdown of the Bridal banner. And make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because I wish YouTube sub boxes would show my videos as many times as the amount of Summer Fjorm with Lagu's Friend that we're going to be seeing after this Hall of Forms. So with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.